Now, here's Ed Bernstein.
Hi, and welcome to our show. My guest today is Sheriff Joe Lombardo, who, last time you were on the show, you were running for office.
Yeah, correct.
Now you are. Now you're the sheriff. And how is it different being the sheriff than running for sheriff?
Well, you know, it's that's a good question. Never thought of it in that aspect, but it's a demand, a lot of demand on your time associated with being the sheriff. And you know, in any organization, when your name's the last one on the bill per se that you have to sign off on, it's interesting. It's but I'm enjoying it. It's what I expected. You know, a lot of people wonder if I have enough time to do things like go out into the community and run a police department, and I do, and it's frustrating every time they apologize for asking me to be present or participate in different functions. And I told them that's what I ran for. I ran for the office to do that and be part of the community and explain what we're doing as a public safety, and so it's different in that aspect.
Well, look, you work in a department as long as you have. You must have said to yourself, boy, if I were sheriff, I would do fill in the blank. Is there one of those things that you have done?
Yeah, you know, that is. You do that, and I think that's in any organization you're on. You know, if you say if I was the king for a day, this is what I would do. So one of the things I did implement right away was decentralization. And that means that our detectives were in a hierarchical organization. They were basically siloed away from the community and the aspects of their jobs. If you were to become a victim of a crime per se, your initial contact would be with the patrol officer. But then you would have minimum interaction with the detective that actually investigated that crime. And so it was my plan or my desire or my idea to decentralize all those detectives, push them out into the area commands and where you live and that they're responsible for, to have that, you know, put a name to a number per se and have a better quality and more timely investigation associated with the crime that you were a victim of. So we've seen some good success so far. We pulled the trigger on that reorganization in July, and we've seen a lot of positive changes associated with that.
How important are those area commands?
Well, you know, like I said, it's the first point of contact, it's the first line of defense, it's the first response when you are a victim or you have a quality of life concern, and it's what you relate to in police service. It's actually where you conduct either where you work or where you live, and that's your first point of contact of safety and the things that we do as a police department. So it's important for you to know where that is. It's important for you to know who the actual police officer is that is responsible for where you work or live. And it's hard to do that if you have people in disjointed areas. It's that whole community pride and that community policing mantra or theory in police work, and I think the importance of it is up at the top of the scale. So.
And we have a new one coming online, right?
Yeah.
Sahara and Cimarron?
Yeah, up in that area. Currently the traffic bureau is housed there. The guys on the motorcycles that you get nervous about when they pull up behind you. They're currently housed there. We're going to push them out into another area of town because they don't spend a lot of time at the substation. They're out and about and doing what they do. So ideally, I want to put patrol officers in that station they occupy. And that'll help up on the west end of Las Vegas, where it's a very cumbersome, very large, expansive area that the police officers are responsible for. And we're going to give some assistance in that area up there. So, and that's as a result of the passing of the More Cop sales tax. That 0.05 will enable me to hire 130, 135 police officers. And it takes me a minimum of about 121 police officers to staff a station. So we'll be able to get the numbers in order to occupy that.
Does that give you enough police? I mean, every time I talk to a sheriff, there's, you know, it seems like there's never enough, right? But I mean,
you know, I would say no. It's enough in the short term, but not in the long term. Ideally, you want to have 2 officers per 1,000, and that's the formula we use across the United States. It's 2 officers per 1,000 to have a positive effect on fighting crime.
Right. And where are we at Metro?
Metro, we're 174 currently because of our recent population increase. And I need right around 300 to 325, 350 police officers in order to maintain that 2 officer per 1,000 ratio. But I have to remind everybody that that doesn't include our tourism population. That's just for our permanent residents. So, and if you were to equate the populace associated with tourism,
Another, what, 100,000? Right.
that puts us right around 1.4 per 1,000, and it's very hard to provide safety for the community with that kind of ratio. So I'm looking for different aspects to go long-term on funding the police department. But you're right, every police administrator ever in history is always looking for more cops, because cops make a difference.
And I think most people agree with it, but it's a matter of where do you get the money.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, there's a lot of coffers that the city and county government are responsible for, so you have to weigh all those. But in my opinion, the economy is hinged on public safety. If we're perceived to be unsafe here in Las Vegas, the tourists won't come, and I think that's very important.
The house falls down.
Yeah.
What is going on around the country with different communities and the police forces? I mean, I've never seen anything like this. You know, what's your take on it?
Well, I think there's 2 different aspects associated with what you're asking. One is perception of police. The pendulum tends to swing back and forth through history. You know, how people respect police, and then they have lack of respect for the police, you know, that authority. And it may be perception of race relations, it may be perception of use of force, excessive use of force. But I think it all depends on your particular jurisdiction that you reside in. It's very hard for me to accept that we get painted with a broad brush, you know, all the same way. Here locally, we have not seen the issues associated with what you're seeing in the media across the United States. I think it's because we've done a lot of legwork in the past and bringing in the community partners in order to be successful as a police department. But yet, we did have some issues a few years ago with use of force, and the Department of Justice came in and talked to us about it and made some mandates to us, and we listened and we adjusted for that, and I think we're a lot better police department as a result of it. But as far as what else is going on, what's happening across the nation is the increase in violent crime. We've had it here, we're experiencing it here locally, and you're seeing it across the United States. That crime pendulum is swinging out into to the edge currently because of that increase in crime. And what we're experiencing here is crime against persons. We've had approximately an 8% increase year over year for the last 2 years, and that's troublesome to me because we have to continue to put systems in place and identify the trends and adjust our work product as a result of that, and ensure that we're providing a safe environment.
Well, it seems almost hypocritical. On one hand, you have crime increasing, so you think that the community be more supportive of the police,
Right.
because there's more crime, they want to feel, you know, more protected. But here you have, you know, more criticism going on at the same time. It's
Right.
an unusual paradigm.
Yeah, it is, and those are the hurdles that we have to cross in order to be successful. And you know, I think what it's important for the public to, well, their concerns are valid concerns because they want to ensure that me being the head administrator, I'm being effective and efficient, and I'm running the police department the best I can, the most efficiently that I can. And I assure you, over the years, we've done a great job of auditing our functions and putting the people in where they need to be, and that we don't have a lot of fluff associated with running this organization. But it's very expensive to run a public safety organization, and people need to understand that. In order, you know, quite often you hear that mantra, you know, where's a cop when you need one? Well,
Right.
you got to have cops in order to have one.
Right,
So,
yeah.
but you're right in that dichotomy of thought. You know, frustration and respect for police, and then also asking for more police associated with it.
And when you talk about the number of police we need in Las Vegas, you brought up the tourism part of it. And obviously, you know, Las Vegas, and we've talked about this for years, is, you know, a target for potential terrorism because of all the tourists, you know, and confined in small areas, not to mention, you know, the gambling and the drinking and some of the other stuff that goes on in Las Vegas. So that requires extra manpower as well, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, policing has changed over time. You know, since 9/11, it's a whole different paradigm. Even in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, their traditional policing model has changed as a result of that. And it has here in the local public safety. So we have a lot of resources dedicated to prevention and protection associated with the terrorism word and the thought process. So that's expensive in itself. There's a lot of disparate databases that we have to draw from, a lot of systems we have to put in place in order to obtain information, and a lot of procedures that we have to conduct in order to ensure a safe environment.
Yeah, and then you add on top of that all the special events that we
Right.
have in town. I mean, with New Year's Eve, and then, like this week with all the Democratic and Republican presidential candidates coming in, and when the president flies in, the vice president, and
Right.
cabinet members. I mean, that all involves Metro as well.
That's true. We have to provide a safe environment for all those different functions, but it's a good thing too. You know, just like you said, that dichotomy of thought. It's also a good thing. The more people that come here, the better our economy. But we have to provide a safe environment for that. And traditionally, people would think, well, doesn't the security at the casinos do that? Well, they do in some aspects, but a lot of it, I wouldn't say a majority, but a large portion of it is provided by us on the police department. And so we have to ensure that that continues to at a good pace and that we're successful in the economy. So last year, as an example, we were responsible, or we participated and provided security for just in excess of 2,400 special events on top of
Wow.
what we do as a police department.
Right.
So
Yeah, and most of them go off without a hitch.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I was over at Life.
We have a unique
yeah.
model here.
Yeah, I was over a couple weeks ago with my kids at Life is Beautiful. I mean, it was.
Did you feel
Just-
good about it?
Yeah,
Good,
Yeah, I mean, I
good.
thought it was nice. I mean, I watched Metro. They were just, hanging around, talking to the kids, and enjoying the entertainment. It was, but it was, it was an event where you felt safe and just to have fun and a good time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was not easy for Metro.
You know, it's interesting. You said with the kids, you would think in a Life is Beautiful Vegas event, their kids wouldn't be a part of it, but in this case, they are. And
Well, they're
for the
teen. When I
parents,
say kids, they're teenagers.
well,
teenage
yeah,
girls.
but still,
Yeah.
under 21 of
Right.
age, and for the parents to feel comfortable enough for the kids to participate in those type of events is a good thing. So,
That's why I go with them.
yeah.
Hey, one of the things that you're starting is starting to once again investigate non-injury traffic accidents,
Correct.
right? We had stopped for a while because of manpower, basically.
Well, it was twofold. One was because of manpower. On an average, if you were involved in an accident, it was right around 3 hours that was part of the process. And that's very cumbersome for us as a police department and providing service. It's very cumbersome for you as a victim of an accident, and you may be on your way to work,
Right.
and it's for you to be on your way, it's troublesome for me as the head of the agency to know that my customers are waiting 3 hours for a simple accident. Also, it was a result of our increase in fatal accidents. The design was to get the police officers away from that traditional just responding to minor accidents, property damage only, so I could put them in an enforcement mode to address our increase in fatal accidents. But over time, we've realized that thought process or that exact answer to the problem wasn't absolute. We've had an increase in fatal accidents, and I think that's directly related to the economy. More people are driving now. And
More traffic.
And a lot of people are going to and from work, more traffic, an increase in population. So those are all the things we have to deal with in fatal accidents. But it was also all the stories along with what it was occurring by us not responding. One is the less number of citations being issued as a result of an accident or the cause of the accident. And two is the people just not being comfortable or feeling safe conducting that business on their own.
Right.
And then, individuals complaining about who's at fault after the fact without a third party, uninterested party making those decisions. So as a result, and the increase in the number of personnel that I can bring on, we're going to go back to handling accidents in order to provide a better service.
First of the year, right?
Yeah, right around the first of the year. So.
Yeah, great. Hey, when you talk about the crime and it's increased around the country, traditionally crime, as unemployment would go down, more people are working, crime would go down.
That's not true.
Okay, that was my question. Why?
Okay,
yeah.
if you, because that's the thought. That's the thought I basically had. But you know, there's a lot of studies associated with crime and the causes of crime. And traditionally, you think if in a poor economy, people will resort to crime in order to feed their families or to get what they were used to having. But that's not true. In the first few years of a downturn of an economy, people tend to huddle. They tend to move back home. They tend to pool their resources in order to be successful in life. And then if it's a continued long-term effect, that's where crime starts to increase over time. And so, you know, and if you were to look at a timeline associated with that, I would say the best timeline would be right around the 3-year mark. And you know, the depression we went through was well in excess of 3 years. So we started to see the increase in crime. You know, and here's the other thought behind it. If you don't have a job and you know and people are moving in together, you probably don't have stuff to be stolen either. You know, and so people go through that thought process. But now, as the economy's increasing, people are seeing more opportunities to be criminals.
So we're talking about violent crime, more an increase in violent crime, not theft crime. So
Right.
Yeah.
It's true. And violent crime, that's cyclical. You know, in traditional crime pictures, we used to have gang issues, a lot of gang issues, and they were the drivers of a lot of violent crime. And then we seem to get our handle or our thumb on the gang issues over time, and you didn't really hear a lot about that in most recent years. But now you're starting to see a little more increase in gang activity. You're starting to see a lot of crime associated with social media. And when I say social media, it's people, you know, relationships that they are aware of on social media, threats that occur across social media. So a lot of violent crime can be a result of that. And I think that's why it's important for parents to be involved in their kids' lives, just to know what's going on, because there's a whole hidden world associated with social media. And I think it's hurt us in some aspects as far as public safety, but it's also been one of the greatest investigative tools for public safety. It's helped us solve a lot of crimes, social media. So.
And how has technology changed your job?
Well, you know, we work smarter would be the aspect I would use. You know, a lot of times we relied on an individual officer's institutional knowledge or their knowledge of the streets and who the crooks were in the neighborhood. But now we can rely a lot on technology. So a lot of data crunching to determine that we have hotspot areas that we need to address. So we can police with a plan when we go out to work. We can saturate areas and things like that. But then also internally, you know, body cameras is a big deal now. It's helped us both be more professional as a profession, and it's also helped us in protecting our officers in frivolous complaints by citizens. And it also gave the public a lot more confidence that we were doing the right thing when we say we were doing the right thing.
So where are we at Metro with the body camera? Obviously you're in favor of it. And
yes.
Yeah, and the transparency it brings. So what percentage of officers have cameras?
Well, on an average, I have approximately 1,100 police officers that wear this uniform that are proactive in the patrol environment. Currently, we have right around 200 cameras deployed, but in the next 12 months, I'll have an additional 500 deployed, and then eventually in the next 2 years, I'm hoping to have the whole patrol division outfitted with cameras.
Hey, what's the, you know, it's confusing to me. You get stopped by an officer. What is,
Did you get stopped?
No, well, I've been stopped in my life, of course. But when I get stopped by a patrol officer, I wait in my car, I roll down the window, I kind of keep my hands on the steering wheel. I mean, what is the procedure?
There you go, you just said it.
That's it? I mean, you shouldn't reach into your glove box.
Yeah, a lot of people would go ahead and reach
get
for the registration, and the most, it's interesting. You would think the most dangerous part of a police job is in our tactical units, where in fact it's the unknown.
It's a
It's our
20-foot
patrol
walk
officer.
to the car.
Yeah, it's a patrol officer responding to a call that he's assuming that the person calling in is giving them accurate information, and you don't actually know what's going to happen after you knock on that door. Or it's that 20-foot walk from his patrol car to the car they had stopped. And that's probably the most dangerous aspect of police work. And so an officer is a little nervous when they're walking up to your car, especially in Las Vegas, where a lot of people have tinted windows because of the heat, that we're exposed to. But you described it exactly what you should do. Roll the window down. If it's at night, put your dome light on, and then put your hands at the 10 and 2 position on the steering wheel, and wait for the officers.
Stay in your car.
Yeah, stay in your car and wait for officers to ask you the questions.
Right.
And then if you're in possession of a weapon, advise them. Like, hey, there's a weapon in the car, just so you're aware, and they'll walk you through the procedure that way.
So if you're allowed to have a weapon in the car as long as it's not loaded, or how does that work?
No, it can be loaded. It just can't be on your person unless you have a CCW permit. So, some people carry a weapon, in their glove box, things like that. It's for their, for various reasons, usually personal protection. I hope it's for personal protection, but that's the case.
I know that you're a big supporter of the Second Amendment, and but it seems to me that police in general, wouldn't they be happier if guns were not available to everybody?
Yeah, they would be happier. That would be ideal for us, but that's not based in reality. And you got the age-old argument. If you put a lot of regulations, restrictions on gun ownership, only the crooks would have guns.
Right.
I mean, we can go back and forth all day with that argument.
There's just so many guns. I mean, you can't go backward anyway.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's over 300 million guns in the United States, and our population is right around 300. 4 or 5, 6, 7 million. So that's enough guns for each individual that resides in the United States. So it's an interesting argument, and yeah, you're right. The police would appreciate it if people had less weapons, but that's not reality. But we train for that. We train to assume that a person is armed when we encounter them. So,
since you became sheriff, medical marijuana dispensaries have opened up. What kind
a couple of them have.
A couple, and there's going to be more.
Right.
And so, what kind of pressure is that put on, and how has that changed policing?
That's an interesting question, because I just recently went and talked to an association associated with marijuana, and that was the same question they presented to me. How would it affect policing and public safety? And my problem with it is the readily available cash business. For individuals not to be involved in the banking aspect of it, or have the ability to deposit their money in some financial institution. That means all the transactions.
And what you're referring to, so our viewers know, is that the federal government does not allow banks to do business with medical marijuana, even if it's legal in the state.
Illegal
it's illegal federally. So there's a lot of cash involved, which is
right. And that's my concern for public safety. Not only people having to be, in possession of great amounts of cash, but crooks knowing that, and it creates a target-rich environment for people to do the wrong things instead of the right things.
How about the DUI aspect of it?
Yeah, well, there's been that is also a concern. There's been a definitive increase in people under the influence of marijuana or cannabinoids associated in Colorado. So, when Colorado, they went to the medical, then subsequently the recreational, there's been a lot of benchmarks in order to study the issues associated with it, in particular public safety. And there has been a definitive increase in the excess of 40% in fatal accidents, where individuals involved in the accidents or causing the accidents had cannabinoids in their system. So that'll be a concern for me moving forward. What people need to understand is no matter if it's alcohol or some kind of narcotics, you're charged the same way, and you have to abide by the laws of the road. So.
But there is a difference in how you investigate and the evidence you acquire in those, and it's much more difficult to acquire the evidence for marijuana than it is for drinking.
The initial assessment of the driver is not any more difficult than it is for alcohol. You still have to have the motor skills and pass the tests associated with it in order to drive on the roadway. The post arrest or the failure of your sobriety test creates an issue. It's still an ongoing issue and discussion in the court system. What's the appropriate amount for people to be considered under the influence, and what's the timeline associated with it. The half-life associated with marijuana is a lot longer than it is for alcohol. So so there's a lot of discussion still involved in this industry. So.
Yeah, with alcohol use to a breathalyzer test or a blood test, and it gives you a relatively accurate count.
Yeah, now with marijuana, a lot of it will be based on the lab environment. So. As a result of that, so.
Right. So okay, so you're getting into more police. What's on your agenda for next year?
Well, next year is we have a lot of still continued reorganization taking place as a result of opening another substation, as a result of decentralization, and how we're actually going to investigate crimes into the future. So we're working through all the nuance associated with that. And then we want to, my mantra has always been to increase the community policing aspect of policing. And we want to ensure that we get some stability and some tenure associated with those community programs and ensure that they're part of the philosophy of policing instead of part of the mandate. And it's going to change a little bit of perception by my police officers and the community. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sheriff Joe Lombardo. Happy to see you here. And talk to you again soon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Accents are never planned.